So good evening, welcome. Glad you could join me today, right? Today I'm actually going to use all the parts from the previous videos to make a book. To start with, we need a front and back cardboard and a spine piece. So I'm using one piece of A4. I'm cutting that small enough to use with just a little piece left, about 1 inch wide for the spine. I'm using my cutting mat and a ruler with a flat edge to cut against. And there's our 3 pieces, front, back and spine. So with those 3 pieces we will need to wrap them in something, and that is why in a previous video I made these faux leather. I'm going to choose one of those sheets of fake leather and we're going to use that for our cover. I quite like that one, but it's a bit small and I might not quite be able to use it. So I believe this is the one I'm going to pick. And place it the other way up with our pieces on. Now if you've got a cover with a pattern and you particularly want a certain piece of the pattern on that, you'll have to make sure you line it up where you place these so that you get the right pattern on the front. As it doesn't really matter with this, I'll just put it wherever it fits. Spread some PVA glue over it, which wasn't really the best glue in the universe. It's quite runny, it's not particularly perfect suited for this job, so I found out later it didn't actually stick very well. There were bubbles in the surface. I get that applied. Make sure it's even all the way over. Place down the first one where you want it to be, and then try to make sure you line up the others. Now I wanted a gap between the first piece and the spine of at least 1/8 of an inch, say 5mm, something like that. As long as it's thicker than the actual cardboard you used to make it with. Whoops, knocked it. To measure it again. It's just the glue just isn't very good. It's not very sticky at all. Whatever measurement you made the first one, make the second. Make sure they're all in line. Make sure they're nicely stuck down. Now here's the first mistake I made in this process, was I should have actually measured around and cut it nice and evenly all the way round. But instead I thought I could do it by eye, and that proved, in my opinion, to be a mistake. You should measure it and cut it evenly all the way round, because if you do that, then at a later stage, if you want to, you can line the inside to make it the same thickness all around. That way it's easier to cut a liner inside. But the paper I was using to line the insides will be the marbled paper that we made in a previous video. So I figured it didn't matter. Actually, I think it does. I think you should measure it, and it looks a lot neater and more nicer if you measure it. I have to cut the corners off, but not all the way to the corner. You want to leave a little bit so that you can fold it in. Otherwise you get ears if it's too big, and if it's too small you'll see the card from the liner. Cut each corner. Some people cut it in a slight sort of curved V shape, but I tend to just cut straight across. I'll try the V shape just to see if it really helps. Make sure the card is nicely glued down, and now we will glue the edges. I'm going to use my steel ruler to fold the edge over with, and I'm switching glue now to this Uhu glue. It's a much stronger bond with this glue. Make sure you get into that little ear piece, otherwise it'll not stick. Using the ruler to try to fold it over, I thought was a good idea. And then do the other side. Plenty of glue. Make sure you get into the corners. Spread that out nicely. Fold it over. Alright, and do the long sides as well. Speed this up for you. Make sure it's well flattened down, as I discovered one of the corners wasn't quite pushed up against the card correctly. And I did trim it off and covered it up with a little bit of brown paint. You'd never know it was. But if you were using like a material or a fake leather or real leather even, you don't want to be cutting the corner off, so you want to make sure it's glued right the way up to the edge and pushed hard against the edges. Now if that was cut nice and evenly, that would be a perfect rectangle on each side. So if you wanted to put a liner sheet the same thickness as the cover, you'd be able to. So here's my second mistake, in my opinion, is I got a bit carried away at this point and really wanted to stick the liner sheet in, which I should not have done. So I wanted to use that one, same colour, similar colours to the folder cover, the actual outside of the book, which I thought would complement it nicely. It needs to be trimmed down slightly because it's A4 and it didn't shrink very much during the marbling process. During the tea staining process, the A4 printer paper did actually shrink fairly considerably, but the marbling, it didn't seem to change much. So I'll just slice off a piece, and hopefully if I've done it right, it should fit perfectly. And it does. There you go. Look at that. Nice. Now, I totally shouldn't be doing this. This should be the first page in the book. And the other one, similar colour, could have been the last page in the book. That way you can use the actual first page of the book to stick it to the cover. And the last page of the book sticks to the other side. But I didn't do that. I wanted to stick the liner in and then think of a way to attach the pages of the book to the cover, which is fine if you're doing a kind of stitch through the cover technique, but I didn't want to do that. So this is more of a how not to make a book than how to actually make one. But the learning process means that next time I make one, I think I can make a very good job of it. So I learned a lot during this process. One of them would be that I think it would be nicer to have a harder book cover and more. So I've ordered some beech plywood, which I could use for the covers. It's 3mm thick, available on Amazon, and it's perfect in the sense of like it's thin enough to be able to cut quite easily and holes in it easily if you want to, and it's thick enough to have some weight to it when it's to use as a cover. You can also use them for pyrography or laser cutting. So what I decided to do was to mix the tea-stained pages with the coffee-stained pages. But even though they were from the same batch of printer paper, the coffee-stained pages seemed to shrink more than the tea, which is very odd. So it's a case of piling them up into 3 pages to be a signature. I want to start off with a coffee-stained one and finish with a tea-stained at the end. And that's when I realised that the other ones are slightly taller and need trimming down to the same size. I've had a nice guillotine. I could cut them all at once and make sure they're all identical. I did my best with a little cutter that I've got, and I'm pretty pleased with the result. They all came out fairly good. Here I'm using a chopstick to try to get a nice crease into the cover. It would have been better if the chopstick was long enough to go all the way along the board, but it wasn't quite long enough. Give it a nice crease. This is when I discovered that the cover hadn't actually glued down properly. Now you could use a syringe with glue to put some in there. With a cover like this, you could put a touch of brown paint over the top and no one would ever see the hole where you syringe the glue in. But I'm not going to do that. I also lined another one with the yellow sheet. Just comparing how the pages fit into the book. Is there enough overhang from the cover? And I think it's pretty nice how it is. The pages naturally shrink during the tea staining process to pretty much the perfect size. I'd like to curve the spine of the book. That's one thing that might be an idea, because it is quite wide compared to the pages. Just zoom in a little. Now, I'm no expert here, but I'm going to have a go at sewing these pages. So I made myself a little template where I wanted holes to be. I think I just realised in time before I got that in the wrong place. I want a piece of card the same length as the pages, with lines on where each hole's got to be put. The signature. So I'm using my little awl that I got in a kit from Amazon. Just a cheap bookbinding tools kit that gave me some waxed thread and all the bone folder, which is plastic, and some other bits and bobs. I realised I might need something to push through on, so I've got a piece of corrugated card, which proved quite good. So everywhere there's a line, I want to push that all through the pages as neatly as possible. Get through all 3 pages and into the card. Trying to line it up so that there's a little bit of space so I can actually put it through there. the crease area, not just before it or just after it, trying to get the hole right on the crease. There is a little cradle that I've ordered from Etsy, which is supposed to help with this process, but we shall see when it arrives. We shall make another book, I'm sure. Speed this up for you. This process is supposed to line up all the holes, theoretically. I want to have it one tea stained, one coffee stained, one tea stained signature, and switch them all the way through the book, give a bit of variation in the pages. After I've marked where the holes are, I just widen them slightly after I've moved the card out of the way. So the thread that came in the kit, the waxed thread, is fairly thick, so it's the holes have got to be fairly large. If any of the signatures are slightly taller, then I line the cardboard with the bottom edge so that when they're all stacked up together, the holes will line up. If I matched it with the top edge on some of them, then the holes would be misaligned. So this isn't a stitching tutorial, far from it. When you see the peg's ear I made of it, at least the pages stay together, but how I managed it. I changed the pattern somehow halfway through. Started off alright. Once you get to your second signature in, tie it off, leave a little tail, not too long. It's going to get glued down anyway, so in this case it's not a visible stitch. There are some I want to try that are visible, so I might do on my next attempt, which means you've got to be much more precise with the stitching so it looks nice and neat. I was just pleased the pages stayed together when I was done. That's all I was going for. So I had to attach a piece because it wasn't long enough. But when I was done, just wanted to tie it off somewhere on the back, so looped it through. Somehow I got a knot in my thread. But luckily I was finished at that point and I didn't mind. Put the needle away, don't want to accidentally sit on it or something. Which, yeah, is a thing I would do. In the kit came these little snippers which don't work. Thanks, snippers. So, just use the scissors and do it properly. There you go. And snip the other two off. Yeah, I messed that stitch up somehow. I don't know what I did wrong, but yeah, it's holding them together, sort of. So it's got some glue on it. It'll be wonderful. So we're using the book press on its back. Book press we made in a previous video. We've got it wedged in with some boards with just the hinge sticking out so that I can glue them together, trying to arrange it so that it's only just sticking out a few millimeters. Don't want too much protruding, otherwise the glue will seep too far in and stick all the pages together. You just want the glue just to stick the spine, and only the spine. I left it in the clamps to dry for a while and then repeated it and put another layer on because I was worried to put too much on in one go, because it would definitely take too long to dry and seep through. So I was just adding bits of glue here and there where it looked like there wasn't much, without going overly crazy, putting a thick layer on in one hit. Because I'd already lined the inner sheet onto the hard back, I had to figure out a way of connecting the book pages to the case. So I decided to use the second sheet, marbled sheet that I'd made. It was a similar colour. Glue that to the back of the pages. So I put plenty of glue on, a pretty liberal thick layer. I know it wouldn't seep through now because I've already actually layered several layers of glue on, so it's not going to seep through and stick all the pages together, but it will enable me to bind this liner sheet to the page bundle, giving me something to attach it. Lining it up was fairly tricky, but once I got it right, I left it clamped up for a considerable time to make sure the glue set really well. I even reinforced it with a little strip of cardboard. It was tricky to get it to line up absolutely perfect, because once those pages are stuck down to the front and back, I'm just going to trim them down part way and stick it in. What I should have done is used one sheet for the front, one sheet for the back, and actually made them the first and last pages of the book bundle, and then I could have just used those to stick them in, but I didn't. Silly mistake, rookie mistake. I won't do that again. So once I was happy with the positioning, left it to dry. So it's now well bonded, and our reinforcement cardboard strip has also been bonded on, just to give it some extra strength. And the way up I want to put it, and then I'm going to attach it to the case by cutting down those pages front and back to just like an inch or an inch and a half, so that can be attached and glued to the book binder cover. It's a method, it works. It's not ideal, but it was my hastiness to glue in the liner sheet that was actually the mistake. So let's get this done. So let's get this show on the road, shall we? Just going to try and measure it out so it's fairly even from the spine, not from the pages. So I'm trying to line it up where I want it in the centre of the spine and measure from there. And then cut that off. Never got to see your own markings on this dark marbled paper. Right, once I'm happy, I'll finally make a mark. Line it up as best as I can. It didn't look right, it didn't look straight. That was actually confusing me. The actual marbled pattern was making it look more angular than it really was. But I decided I could probably get a straighter edge by using the circle cutter. That would get a neater cut. It did mostly. It's a tiny little edge that flayed. Same thing again. I did it better that time. And that gives me a little tab either side to glue into the book. Not ideal, but a fix for an issue that I created for myself. The tricky part is getting it to line up right in the centre, which didn't actually happen in the end. It did move slightly over. Mainly because the actual spine on the hard cover is actually too wide. It's wider than the book pages. I deliberately didn't compress the book pages when I stitched them. I didn't want them really tightly bound like you should, and bind them really close together. I didn't want to do that because I wanted them fairly loose to take up a bit of space in the book. But it does mean that the hinge is rather bigger than it should be. Now, if I'd thought about it at this moment, I would have curved that spine. It would make it effectively narrower. Could have used a rolling pin or some round object, some cylindrical object. Make sure that doesn't come apart. Get it lined up nicely and glue it in place. This glue is stronger than the PVA glue, although the PVA glue is acid free. I'm not sure if this one actually is, so I'm not sure of its longevity, but it's definitely a faster bonding and a stronger bond glue. So I mark just about where I want it to go. Try to crease it with a bone folder on the hinge areas so I know which places to apply the glue, because I don't want any glue on the actual back of the hinge because that will make it stick down. I only want the glue on the edges of the pages, on these edges here. If I get any glue on the back, on the spine, it's going to stick down and the book will be very difficult to open. So let's line it all up, try and get it in place and stick it down. Excellent. Very pleased. And it looked better than I thought it was going to once it was down. That's the next place where the hinge was. I'm using a bit of greaseproof paper to make sure it doesn't leak through onto the page. And then close the book. Line it up. I did get some glue on my finger, which means it's going to get on the page. And at the moment, while the glue is still wet enough, I can slide it slightly to make sure it is in exactly the right place. The slightest little angle is like a picture frame. One tiny little bit on the string and the picture can be very crooked at the other end. One tiny little adjustment on the hinge can make the book pages look very crooked. So while the glue is still pliable and movable, I wanted to try to make sure it would line up. I didn't like the way it was pulling to one side, but the glue is beginning to dry now and getting more difficult to adjust. So I'm just going to have to go with whatever happens now. Make sure it's not too sticky, so get in some greaseproof paper. Make sure that's all well stuck down. And now we're going to make some corners to go on the covers, the four corners of the hardcover. We're going to make those corners in another video, so if you haven't seen that, check that out. I should put the link up in the corner, ironically. So, I hope you enjoyed that. There it is, complete with its corners, complete with mistakes and fixing methods. And I think it still looks pretty nice after it all. So, hope you enjoyed, and on with the next.